We said that, at times, in those dark days, that it would be a miracle if we got Brexit.
Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're looking at the most impactful event of each year across the 21st century.
And to unlock the phone, I just take my finger and slide it across. All right, you want to see that again?
2000, the Y2K bug.
With nearly everything in our economy run by computers, the prospect of a digital meltdown is too huge to contemplate.
Younger millennials and Zoomers may not remember, but 1999 and 2000 were years defined by fear over Y2K. Computerized calendar data on 90s-era machines only used 2 digits to represent years. National, international, and local news featured Y2K doomsayers, predicting that the glitch could cripple computer systems across the world. Experts claimed that the fix would take around $500 billion to implement. President Bill Clinton rallied the U.S. federal government to the fight, organizing programmers to avoid disaster.
Some small businesses, local governments, and other organizations have been slower to address the Y2K challenge. So again, I say to these groups, don't just sit back and wait for problems to occur.
When the ball dropped and the world's calendars turned over, any glitches were barely a blip on the radar.
Happy New! What?
Oh no, it's happening.
2001, September 11th.
Not knowing what to do, with no one telling him what to do, and no Secret Service rushing in to take him to safety. Mr. Bush just sat there.
The September 11th attacks on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon shook the world. When hijacked passenger jets crashed into and destroyed the World Trade Center, we all knew the world had irrevocably changed. Air travel and commerce came to a standstill. Thousands died when the towers fell. In the intervening years, thousands more would succumb to cancers born of toxic material from ground zero.
It was 2 realizations, right? One, that the immediate death toll, and then the fact that this was an attack on America.
The entire country came to a standstill that day, in a spirit of unity that seems impossible in today's hyper-partisan world. Islamophobia rose throughout the country, and for the first time in history, Article 5 of the NATO Charter was invoked. It was an event with so many ripples that it changed history forever.
I remember seeing lots of debris, metal, paper raining down from the towers.
2002, the creation of the euro. Many members of the European Union spent decades envisioning a future with a common currency. It would ease trade, stabilize the European economy, and bolster smaller countries. In the early years of the 1990s, a plan was enacted to phase in the euro. The currency had something of a soft launch in 1999, applying to digital commerce and accounting. On January 1, 2002, member nations of the EU said goodbye to their own currencies.
Yeah, a lot of people normally throw a pound coin, and until they get used to the money themselves, they're only going to throw a €1 coin, so we'll be worse off for the first month or two of the new year, I'd imagine.
The franc, Deutschmark, and lira essentially went the way of the dodo bird, and member nations adopted the euro as their own. It was a major step in forging permanent bonds between European neighbors.
Individual sheets are selected at random during each production phase to ensure consistent quality and identify any misprints.
2003, the U.S. invasion of Iraq.
In this conflict, America faces an enemy who has no regard for conventions of war or rules of morality.
In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, the U.S. and its allies launched an invasion of Afghanistan. In 2003, the war on terror opened a second front. A number of high-ranking members of President Bush's inner circle were in the White House a decade earlier. At that time, Bush's father refused to depose Saddam Hussein. The successful invasion of Afghanistan gave them the confidence to finally finish the job. Secretary of State Colin Powell was enlisted to mislead the world about Iraqi weapons of mass destruction.
At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
With that casus belli established, the U.S. launched a shock and awe military campaign. While Saddam was deposed quickly, the war turned into a decade-long quagmire reminiscent of Vietnam.
That deployment was funny because there was no clear-cut mission. The whole time you're wondering, what are we really doing?
2004, the founding of Facebook.
It's definitely pretty surreal.
If it keeps growing at its current rate, by 2013, every single person in the world who is online will be on Facebook.
In 2004, Mark Zuckerberg was a young college student. Along with several partners, the Harvard University programmer created a new website, the Facebook.
Drop the, just Facebook.
It was not the first social networking site, but it swiftly became the most famous. College students around the country waited for months until their schools joined. Eventually, a rebranded Facebook opened to everyone and ushered in a new era in global communications. In the 2 decades since its creation, Facebook has dominated Silicon Valley. They've bought and crushed competitors, and in 2016, were at the center of an international election interference scandal. Their platform both created an online revolutionary meeting place and spread misinformation around the world. It shaped a social media landscape that has redefined life in the 21st century.
Then you can browse around and see who people's friends are and just check out people's online identities and see how people portray themselves and just find some interesting information about people.
2005, Angela Merkel elected Germany's first female chancellor.
There are a number of conflicts that we cannot solve without the help of Russia, and we will have to find the suitable diplomatic channels to remain in a dialogue with Russia.
Angela Merkel was an East German scientist who rose to prominence in Germany's Christian Democratic Union. In 2005, her party won the parliamentary elections. Merkel became the first female chancellor in the nation's history. She retained that post until she retired 15 years later in 2021. In her time, Merkel's forceful personality and her country's economic might made her a central figure in world affairs. She was widely considered to be the unofficial leader of the EU during her tenure. After Donald Trump's election in 2016, many media figures also called Merkel the new leader of the free world. In any case, Merkel's steady leadership during tumultuous times made her one of the most powerful and respected women in human history.
We will be able to say that the 3 institutions are working very hard with Greece and having very intensive talks with them.
2006, the execution of Saddam Hussein.
Saddam was defiant right up to the last moment. Iraqi television showed images of the 69-year-old appearing calm.
Whether one agrees with the U.S. invasion of Iraq or not, there are few defenders out there for Saddam Hussein's legacy. Saddam, with his mercurial nature and large army, had terrorized the region for years. His brutal dictatorship held the country's majority Shia population under violent control for decades. In 2003, during the invasion, U.S. troops found Saddam hiding in a spider hole. Saddam was imprisoned in Iraq until 2005 when he was held for trial.
He was not prepared to discuss his mistakes with his enemy. He was professional, but he was not cooperative.
Among his innumerable crimes against humanity, the dictator was tried for the Dujail massacre of 148 Shiite Iraqis in 1982. On November 5, 2006, Saddam was found guilty. On December 30th, he was executed. 2007, the invention of the iPhone.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
The year 2007 saw the advent of game-changing technology that has completely changed the way we communicate. On January 9th at Macworld 2007, Apple CEO Steve Jobs revealed the first ever iPhone to the world.
Well, what we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen. A giant screen.
The world has never been the same. Since that day, smartphones have proliferated in every corner of the globe. Their computing power and third-party apps have spread the internet, news, and social media to some of the most remote places on Earth. The success of the iPhone has made Apple one of the most successful companies ever. Still, smartphones are a young technology. The global society is still trying to reconcile with unforeseen consequences like smartphone addiction, disconnection, and loneliness.
You have to take it out of the box to make a call. But here it is. 8 gigs.
2008, the Great Recession.
The National Bureau of Economic Research confirmed what many already felt. The recession began last December and may be far from over.
2 decades of American deregulation turned global finance into a virtually unrestricted Wild West. Emerging technologies increased the speed and spread of trading with every passing year. Finance and banking took larger and larger risks until the world economy exploded. For the first time in modern history, housing prices in the U.S. began to fall.
Let me put it this way. I'm standing in front of a burning house, and I'm offering you fire insurance on it.
Mortgage-backed securities dropped in value, and the truth behind them was revealed. Many were packaged subprime mortgages that were all going bust. Factor in unregulated shadow banking, and you have a recipe for economic disaster. Banks failed. Investment firms collapsed. investors lost everything, and economic contagion spread around the world. It was an era-defining event for young millennials who saw their promised bright future go up in smoke.
This isn't just about Wall Street, this is about Main Street.
2009, Barack Obama becomes President of the United States.
I will never forget who this victory truly belongs to. It belongs to you.
The Great Recession was the last nail in the coffin for Republican hopes of keeping the White House after Bush. Republican Senator John McCain's campaign floundered in the midst of growing economic calamity. Voters of all stripes gravitated to Democratic candidate Barack Obama.
Yeah, I think it's cool because we're living history right now.
He represents change, hope, progress.
His message of hope and change was a lifeline for people tired of war and fearful for their wallets. In November of 2008, Obama won an overwhelming 365 electoral votes. In January, Obama was inaugurated as the 44th President of the United States. He was the first non-white president in the country's history. His ascension provided hope to underrepresented minorities. For many, the first black president redefined what was possible in America.
Women couldn't vote, then black people couldn't vote, and now there's a black president running. That's just amazing.
2010, a year of Caribbean and Gulf disasters.
Shoddy construction in this impoverished nation meant buildings toppled to the ground.
2010 was a year of disasters. In January, a massive 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck Haiti. The Caribbean island had already suffered from decades of corruption, crime, and foreign interference. As a result, Haiti was ill-prepared for disaster. The quake virtually destroyed the entire country's infrastructure. Hospitals, airports, telecommunications, and the grid were all wiped out. Upwards of 300,000 Haitians died in the aftermath, and many fled to the U.S.
Many Haitians were just trying to get out of the country. Canada opened its arms to thousands of refugees, giving immigration priority to those affected.
The entire world mobilized. Aid workers flooded in and saved many. Unfortunately, Haiti has never fully recovered. Piling on, in April, a BP oil rig suffered cataclysmic failure. Deepwater Horizon spilled over 210 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. It was one of the worst environmental disasters in human history. 2011, Fukushima earthquake and nuclear disaster.
I was amazed how long this thing was going. It just did not want to stop.
Unfortunately, 2011 was no better than 2010 when it came to calamity. In mid-March, a mind-boggling 9.0 earthquake struck 45 miles off the Tohoku region of Japan. The ensuing tsunami caused unbelievable devastation to Japan's coast. As if that weren't bad enough, the earthquake and tsunami led to a worse human-made disaster. The event caused massive damage to the power grid and to the Fukushima nuclear power plant.
That's where the reactor is. In its sister units, this location is where the meltdowns got real.
The plant suffered a meltdown. Hundreds of thousands were displaced and 51 died while the government struggled to contain the disaster. While they were ultimately successful, it was a close call. Negative effects are still felt in the region more than a decade later.
If one of these pressurized pipes sprung a leak, our radioactive contamination risk would be very high.
2012, the discovery of the Higgs boson.
It could be, it's very reasonable that these other particles all exist in this ether that would be called, named after Peter Higgs.
The European Organization for Nuclear Research, or CERN, spent 10 years building the Large Hadron Collider. Thousands of scientists from hundreds of universities around the world have been involved with research there. 4 years after the facility went online, they announced a huge discovery. Almost 600 feet below the surface, the particle accelerator led to a breakthrough in physics. Scientists announced the discovery of the Higgs boson. Until then, only a theory. This God particle, according to theoretical physicists, plays a central role in particle physics. However, it was only a theory until 2012. The discovery was a major step on humanity's path to understanding the universe. 2013, Belt and Road Initiative ushers in era of Chinese economic colonialism. In September 2013, President Xi Jinping announced the largest infrastructure project in human history. This Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, was an investment plan. China approached 130 smaller countries and offered them loans to build railways, roads, and bridges. In return, China gained footholds in countries with valuable untapped resources. Belt and Road has spread hundreds of billions of dollars around the developing world. This has made China the greatest creditor on the planet. Countries around the world owe China quite a bit thanks to BRI. Projects have garnered criticism for human rights abuses and corruption. As a result of BRI, China has gained economic and diplomatic footholds all over the planet. 2014. War and Terror.
Все, мы находимся в своей территории и ждем соответствующее решение.
2014 saw a global rise in war, terror, and violence. In Europe, Ukraine deposed its corrupt Russian-backed president. Fearing a pivot westward, Russia invaded eastern Ukraine and annexed Crimea. In Iraq and Syria, remnants of Iraqi Baathists joined with religious extremists to form a new terrorist organization. ISIS conquered parts of both countries, creating a caliphate fueled by oppression and murder.
هذا ما نبتغيه وهو هدم الحواجز وكسر الحدود ولله الحمد والمنة كما وعد شيخنا.
Worst of all, the Yemeni civil war began. Backed by Iran, Houthis rebelled against the government backed by the Saudis and UAE. In 9 years of war, Russia and the US have also been involved. Hundreds of thousands have died in a nation on the verge of collapse. COVID and famine have also spread, resulting in the starvation of tens of thousands.
3 of Mohammed's children were born in this siege. They all show signs of malnutrition and spend most of their lives inside.
2015. Oberfell v. Hodges.
Today's ruling from the Supreme Court affirms what millions across this country already know to be true in our hearts. Our love is equal.
Despite global suffering and instability, there were bright spots in the middle of the 2010s. In 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling in Oberfell v. Hodges. In the case, a gay man named Jim Oberfell sued the state of Ohio for recognition of his marriage. The case combined with similar cases in Kentucky, Michigan, and Tennessee. A few years later, the 5-4 ruling required all states to recognize and perform same-sex marriages. It was a revolutionary moment in LGBTQIA+ rights. While more than half of U.S. states had already passed state laws, gay marriages weren't always eligible for federal benefits. This case changed everything.
In the places where where the American people had the opportunity to vote on this, they strongly voted to retain the understanding of marriage that has been in our law throughout our history.
2016, Brexit, Trump, and the rise of right-wing populism.
Well, that is it. Brexit. The giant screens declare in red, white, and blue, we're out.
2016 was the year of the right-wing populist. In response to economic stagnation and trends in global migration, an anti-immigrant wave spread around the world. In Austria, a far-right Nazi-connected politician barely lost an election in April. In May, the Philippines elected Rodrigo Duterte. His anti-drug death squads were a feature, not a bug.
And if you really destroy my country, I will kill you.
In June, shocking the world, Britain voted to leave the EU. Fears of losing sovereignty mixed with white nationalism to propel Brexit to victory. Finally, in November, the US elected Donald Trump. The first black president was succeeded by a man who promised a wall on the southern border and a suspension of Muslim migration to the U.S.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States, Donald Trump. Thank you. It's been an honor.
2017, Harvey Weinstein and Me Too.
Some of Hollywood's biggest stars, like Meryl Streep, have since said they were unaware of Weinstein's alleged misconduct. But a handful have admitted they knew.
Donald Trump's misogynistic language and history led to a feminist backlash the day after he became president. Women around the country marched in defiance. By October, that feminist wave hit the shore. Powerful movie mogul Harvey Weinstein was accused by multiple women of sexual harassment and assault. The story gave survivors all over the world the courage to come forward with their own stories. Accusations came out against other celebrities as well as powerful men in virtually every industry. The Me Too movement was a reckoning. Businesses and institutions were confronted by their cultures of silence and cover-up. Famous men lost their jobs, and a new gender-based front in the culture wars had been opened.
I've been reconsidering how much time I want to spend on a set, and if it's a place where I feel like I feel safe with the crew.
2018, Xi Jinping becomes president for life.
我觉得对于我们这一代年轻人，大
家都是从心里都比较爱国，因为我觉得习主席上台之后对我们国家的影响也是非常大的。
President Xi Jinping of China has had an impressive rise to power. He grew up in rural China after his father was purged from the Communist Party. From those humble beginnings, he rose to the highest echelons of Chinese power. He ramped up the use of mass surveillance and censorship. He alienated and divided his enemies. Then, in 2018, Xi cemented that power for life.
没有任何力量能够撼动我们伟大祖国的地位。
He forced the party to abolish presidential term limits. As long as he is able to hold power in an iron grip, Xi is effectively a modern-day emperor.
He pushed forward democracy in China.
So I'm starting to see a pattern here. Anyone who criticizes Xi Jinping ends up in jail.
2019, Greta Thunberg.
Right now, we are desperate for any sign of hope. Well, I'm telling you, there is hope. I have seen it.
Climate activist Greta Thunberg is often criticized by right-wing politicians. But her rise to prominence is an example of how anyone can make a difference. At 15, Thunberg led school strikes for climate action in Sweden. A year later, in 2019, Thunberg was delivering a major address to the UN Climate Action Summit. Her "How dare you" speech reflected the anger of an entire generation of young people.
All you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
She demanded that the world's governments act to preserve a livable world for their children. In 2019, her clarion call for action could not have come any sooner.
The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not.
That same year, the Amazon, the world's lungs, lost 3,500 square miles of forest to wildfires. 2020, COVID-19.
We're having, I would say, 10 code 99s every 12 hours at least.
2020 was the year the Earth stood still. By March, the entire world had to contend with the spread of a deadly respiratory virus from China. COVID-19 quickly grew to pandemic-level spread, ignoring borders. The virus changed the way we all live. Entire cities were quiet for weeks and months as those who could quarantined at home. Medical experts scrambled to provide the terrified public with what information they could.
So-called surge tents popping up, ER rooms preparing for potential patient overflow.
Debates over masks and various medical treatments spread quickly on social media. Tens of thousands filled the world's hospitals, many dying on ventilators. Medical professionals were pushed beyond their limits, and millions died. It would take an entire year to develop vaccines.
In the greatest country in the world, to slowly watch infirm elderly people be picked off by a deadly disease, it's unacceptable.
2021, the January 6th insurrection.
Start making a list, put all those names down, and we start hunting them down one by one.
Traitors get guillotined!
In the weeks leading up to the 2020 presidential election, it became increasingly clear that Joe Biden would probably win. President Trump railed against the polls and embarked on a months-long disinformation campaign. Any loss, he said, would be the result of a massive conspiracy and fraud. The most vehement of his supporters heeded his calls to action. On January 6th, thousands of Trump supporters flocked to Washington. After a rally on the Ellipse, they invaded the U.S. Capitol building.
Capitol Hill police retreated a little bit more. Then hundreds more protesters started to stream up this walkway in front of the Capitol. It is a remarkable scene.
The insurrection's goal was to stop the counting of electoral votes and give Trump a chance to declare martial law. The brutal attack traumatized law enforcement officials. It resulted in several deaths, hundreds of prosecutions, an impeachment, and criminal charges for Donald Trump.
The physical destruction of that day has since been cleaned up, but questions of how to repair the deeper damage to our democracy remain.
2022, the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
І ми їх переможемо, навіть якщо ми помремо, і ворог буде розбитий. Я в цьому впевнений на 300%.
In 2022, Russian President Putin decided that he wanted to finish the job he began in Ukraine in 2014. In February, Russian forces launched a full-scale invasion of their neighbor. The war is the worst fighting on European soil since World War II.
Vladimir Putin, please, go out to our country. Go out,
We don't want you. We don't want war, and we don't want you.
Ukraine, led by comedian-turned-President Zelensky, defied the world's expectations. Instead of falling in a matter of hours or days, the invasion was stymied. Thanks to financial and military aid from the US and Europe, Ukraine has maintained the status quo. One of the surprising results of the invasion was the strengthening of NATO. The alliance has expanded, with Finland becoming a member in April 2023. Sweden has also applied, although as of writing, Turkey and Hungary have continued to stall Sweden's bid.
Tonight, there is overwhelming support for the men and women being asked to save their country. But there's also a deep fear the effort will not be enough.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. 2023, the Hamas 10/7 attack and the Israel-Hamas war.
I wanted my nephew to get married. Instead, he became a martyr.
On October 7th, thousands of Hamas militants broke the Gaza border to invade Israel. They savagely massacred around 1,400 Israelis and brought several hundred hostages back to Gaza. Led by a politically embattled far-right government, Israel responded with brutal, overwhelming force. Israel bombarded and invaded the small Gaza Strip, killing thousands of civilians. A brief Thanksgiving truce allowed for hostage and prisoner exchange, but as of now, there is no end in sight for the conflict.
The war has taken the lives of thousands of children here, and it's destroying the childhoods of many more.
It has also resulted in bitter political and cultural divides in the West, often cleaving generationally. Young leftists have lambasted Western governments for their support of Israel. We have also seen major spikes in both anti-Semitism in the wake of the 10/7 attack and Israel's deadly response.
We've been seeing this kind of violence on and on for 75 years, so it's not something that's really new to us. And again, this is a sliver of what Palestinians have been going through for the past 75 years.
Filtering an entire year into a single world-defining event is an impossible task. Were there major historical events that didn't make our list? Let us know in the comments below. Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.